All right, hi everyone. So this is our discussion about the ban announcement on March 31st. So
Let's get to it.
starting off with what we think is going to happen. So we've been talking about this a lot. We think that honestly, Wizards is more than likely either going to ban something like Reanimate from that deck because it's been very dominant. Maybe Myco Spawn, as it's been pretty big in the community that a lot of people aren't liking the play patterns of it. But it also may just be that they're going to end up just doing no changes. I mean, there's no deck that's got too many high numbers. So, I mean, what do you
Mhm.
think they're going to do?
Yeah, I think I'm like 80% on no changes. Um, Disclaimer, I'm not on social media, so I don't know how big the discourse is on like the tweets and all that stuff about how much people are hating it. Anecdotally, everyone that I talk to is like, yeah, I hate Micro Spawn. And then there's like you can sprinkle other cards here and there, right? From like a numbers perspective, there's no deck that is like quote unquote dominating. But if you only look at the MTGO results, right? There's like this kind of like endemic way of that those results get published. Like the challenges are not that many people. We're like floating around 40 usually. And then it's mostly the same people playing the same decks or similar, right? So most of
Yep.
those could just get stabilized there. But if you look at things like ELM last season, where they usually float around 400 people, and now it's like 250 or something. At the LGS, there's people that are starting to come a little less, or because not because they hate the format necessarily, but like maybe a lot of them have floated back to modern because like was interesting for them, or they would rather just play vintage because stock up and all of the PO decks are now much more interesting. So like realistically speaking, Legacy is probably in the worst state of all of Eternal formats, and so I would love for them to do changes.
I fully agree. So, we're going to go to the next slide about what we would like to happen.
Oh boy.
So, I mean, I'm just going to start off with I would love to see Entomb banned. I know it's a very pivotal card and a pillar of the format and has been since it was unbanned over 15 years ago. But Blue Black Reanimator midrange has been the best deck through multiple bans, and it's not fun, at least to me, to just see my opponent go, okay, end step into reanimate, and then they just daze my counter spell or something, and I'm just sitting there, just okay. Well, I guess I've lost to Atraxa. I mean, it feels so much harder to beat than in the past with the Crystal Brand, where they'd go down to like 3 life, and maybe you just top deck Bolt and could do stuff. But nowadays, just the deck feels still way too strong after the last two bans of Psychic Frog and Grief.
Yeah, for sure. And we're almost like lagging behind one band, right? Which is why I would also advocate for nuking the deck harder. And if we overcorrect it, then you can think of unbanning something. But at this point, it feels like we've been in the reanimator meta for way too long. So yeah, I would also want to Twixie ban. The Turbo Reanimator players are gonna be a little sadder, but all five of them, you can try to play Faithless Looting and like Careful Study and stuff like that.
Yeah, like definitely there's ways around it if you're going to do
Yeah.
Turbo Reanimator, especially because the decks play so differently. Where with Entomb you just need two big creatures to three,
Yeah.
versus Turbo Reanimator you're going to have enough that it's not as big of a deal. You're going to be able to Faithless Looting. You've
Mhm.
got the 2 mana one from Modern Horizons 2. Like there's a couple other ones you
Yeah.
can do.
There's also like before we move on from this, a strange phenomenon that happens with Reanimator specifically, like Blue Black, and it's that a lot of people just play the deck because it's the best deck. They don't care necessarily about like the archetype or anything like that. And so I hope that by touching it a little bit, we like there's more like innovation happening, and we discover other good decks. And if there's like enough best decks, quote unquote, we could then think about unbanning it again so that there's other things to compete. And it's not just that, because there's a lot of people that just come to play Legacy for like the showcases to transform points or whatever, and they just play the best deck without any,
Yeah.
interest in that.
And I mean, you could definitely hit Troll and argue for Reanimate. Those
Mhm.
are definitely like viable candidates, but I think at this point, the card that's going to hurt the deck the most and
Yeah.
make the meta more diverse is just getting rid of Entomb. As for like other cards we've been talking about, there's a lot of Stompy decks running around with Eldrazi consistently going from like 5 to 12% depending on the week, and Moon Stompy. And those have been making it very hard for decks like Control to come back into the
Mhm.
meta. I mean, you've got Micro Spawn that just destroys lands, makes it hard for control. The One Ring that if it ever hits the battlefield, you're not catching up. But control is just so hard to remove with it being indestructible. And Kozilek's Command slash Glaring Flesh Raker that just provides so much value across so many decks, not even just Eldrazi, but you've got so many combo decks that are just adding it in because it's a card that digs deep, adds mana, exiles graveyard and creatures. It does it all. And so a colorless card being able to do all that and target two things, so you can't even like get rid of the initial target. It does a lot of stuff. So these are all cards I've considered. I wouldn't ban all of them, as I think that would cause too much of a shift and hurt the decks too much. But I definitely could see at least one of these going in the bans. And I would like for that to happen.
I think Microspawn for me is just like a clear show is going to be of what their strategy is going to be with Legacy, in my opinion. Like Microspawn is just such an egregious card that if they think that this card is fine for the format, I'd have like serious questions about what the strategy is. Cosmic's Command is an aberration as well in a way. Like it does so much for like you know we talk about the color pie as like a joke at this point, but yeah, Cosmic's Command to me just does too much. The ring is interesting because I feel like it is both constraining like things that you can do in combo decks, kind of like how Thoracle coalesces all decks into it, but it gives enough ways for like that. It's not uncommon for you to, if you play against Moonstomping, they have the ring and you can stop it. Then the game becomes about, can I kill them before they outdraw me that much? And you're just like countering Bombardiers or other rings so that they cannot get rid of their own ring. And there's a lot of way. It creates still somewhat interesting patterns to me. And there's like other cards that you just can't see things like Narset, for example, because control is so dead. So I think with Microspawn being gone, you also enable a little bit more like of the mid-range decks to come back, which is what control is good against, and so you also get a revival of control there. So yeah, Microspawn for sure. The other two, I could see them. I'm not gonna cry if they get banned, but I would see Microspawn as like the only one that I would really, really want them to hit.
And then one of the last big cards that we talked about was Nadu. I think Nadu's definitely like keep an eye out for it because I get how the play pattern can be not fun, but I think overall, I mean, it's been a while since Image 3's been out, and Nadu's just outside of Breakfast not been putting up that many results. I think it's all right for the format, but definitely if other big things get banned, it could end up taking over, and so definitely keeping an eye out for it. But at least from my perspective, I think Nadu's perfectly fine at the moment.
I just think it's a pattern that's just so unfun. It's also unfun if you're playing Nadu because your opponent doesn't have to concede, even though the game is functionally over. You're just drawing usually either 4 or 8 cards per cycle, if not more. If not ending the game altogether at that point. It just I don't know. I just feel like the card doesn't need to exist in Legacy like at all. We have Grief banned in Modern and Legacy. I think it's one of the only cards that were like hit on both places. I would love for Nadu to be touched as well, especially since they have already admitted, Microspawn, we don't have an article that says Microspawn was a mistake, but for Nadu we do have one. And so I would also just like it to be just removed, just so that we can, have better, plays for blue-green. Like right now, there's literally no reason for you to play any other blue-green 3-drop. Like Uro is basically gone. And any other cards that we can see for like Hands of Tarkir or whatever, you can see like, oh wow, this is like blue-green, it's cool. Like the new like Rakshasas Inside or whatever it's called. And it's like, yeah, but would you play that over Nadu, right?
Yeah.
Probably not.
That makes sense. All right, and then we're going to go for like a kind of out there band pick.
Oh boy.
So, Memory's Journey. I know Otter has a lot more to say about this than I do, but I could definitely see it being a card that could see a ban if you don't want to hit Oops All Spells or Cephalid too much, but still want to ban and hurt those decks.
Yeah. Memory's Journey, for me, I really dislike Oops as like a play pattern. I almost always make the analogy of like, I'm sitting down to play Magic and my opponent throws the deck away, brings a revolver with 1 life bullet, and it's like, let's just roll, right? The fact that I can go, let's say that I prepare for it, right? And I'm like, okay, I mulligan to turn 1 Nile Spellbomb because I know you have it. and the correct play for them is to still go for it because they have inbuilt resilience mid combo. Like usually you'd have to be like things like I don't know, show and tell, for example. If you are in a field against a lot of counter spells or whatever, you need to have the disruption before you go for it, right? You need like Veil of Summer, Defense Grid, all of those, Flusterstone, whatever. You need to prepare before you go. You cannot just still show and tell, and while you do what the combo is meant to do, you're already protected by itself, right? Memory Journey doesn't deal with like Leyline Binding. Leyline of the Void, but no one plays that main deck in general. But it does deal with like all of the removal, basically, unless you're also like a blue deck, which you also need to force this as well. In which case, there's just too many layers, and it puts just too much pressure on the starting hand. I love Oops as a concept that the deck exists in a way. I feel like Memory's Journey is just a card that if you wanted to get creative about underpowering the deck a little bit and while not killing the deck entirely, like you know, you're not killing like Balustrade Spy or Other City Informer, you're just taking a little bit of the resiliency. I feel like against a deck like Oops that is so all in, if I open turn one Nihil Spellbomb, they should just have to scoop. That is just my thought.
That makes perfect sense. And then we're going to go to our final slide of just unbans and what we think could be unbanned. Is we saw a lot of unbans recently in the modern format that seem to have helped the format a lot. Obviously, Breach is showing up a bit too much and probably end up getting banned, but it made a lot of people come back to the format. So we were excited to look in what could be unbanned. I mean, Frantic Search, I think, easiest unban. 3 mana, Faithless Looting. I know it untaps your lands, but that card's going to see pretty much zero play, in my opinion. I don't know if you think that you have a way of breaking it, but I think Frantic Search is ready to come off the ban list.
I would slot it immediately into High Tide, like just straight up. How good is High Tide in a meta with Bowmasters everywhere and some amount of disruption plus, you know, very fast clocks? We'll see. I think it's an interesting one. Mind's Desire felt incredible to me when they unbanned it. I felt like that would be all we would be playing against, and it fizzled out almost immediately. So we'll see. It would at least be one of those like, you know, cool cards that you can get back into. If we're banning Entomb, this is also a way to dig for those decks if they want to try to play this, like something like Frantic Search and tap into stock up, perfectly fine. So yeah, we'll see.
Another big one we were talking about, and that's been talked about a lot in the community, is Deathrite Shaman. I mean, I've been playing a lot of Vintage, getting ready for some events later this year, and Deathrite Shaman just has not felt that strong. I know it's the 1 mana Planeswalker, but Tameo is the 1 mana Planeswalker now. I mean, Deathrite, people like talk about using it as graveyard hate also, and I just don't think it's going to do graveyard hate that well, because the only way you hit graveyard decks is normally by having green to hit those creatures, and if you're playing Deathrite, you're probably not playing green. Otherwise, there's
Yeah.
probably better stuff you can play than Deathrite. So I think it's perfectly fine to unban here. I mean, you're getting a effectively 2/2 unblockable mana dork sometimes if you pay a mana every turn. Like, I don't think that that's egregious anymore. I think it's perfectly fine to unban.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned that it's a black card in a way. Especially because if they do something like, so you could see something like they touch troll, let's say they ban it and that they unban this, then it's like another way for them to go and play into the Moonstomping matchup better, but it still, you know, has weaknesses in terms of like getting tagged by Chalice of the Void. If they drop an early Blood Moon, you can't deploy the what's his name, the DRS anymore. But also, even if you do, you don't have fetches or wastelands anymore, so it also tags you there. So it'd be an interesting card to see deployed. I think like some of the control decks would rather still play maybe what's his name, Halfling,
Yeah.
just to ramp into in this, like uncounterable is very important. And it's also not free for a lot of decks because of we depend on the graveyard more and more now. Things like Murktide, for example, would be like forefront, right? So there's now a little bit of cost to actually tying your graveyard. It's obviously a good advantage to tag theirs, but I would still want to see the RS. I'm fine with the deck Like I don't think it slots as well into like the blue black mid range anymore. But we could be, completely incorrect and be like something that we also need to ban after from blue black. So we'll see. I'd still think it would be exciting.
Yeah, and then I think the last one, at least for me, was Earthcraft.
Hmm.
I think the only reason to not unban it is because it's on the reserve list, and I get now wanting to unban
Yeah.
reserve list cards, but I I mean it's a two card combo. There are so many of them in Legacy at this point, and I
Yeah.
think it would just be a worse version of Breakfast because you'd also need to find a way to give your creatures haste. Or I guess you could do it on your opponent's end step, but I mean at that point, what you're doing this combo for a turn four win at the fastest, maybe turn two
Yeah.
if you're using like Lotus Battle. I don't think that's gonna be too bad.
I have no opinion. Honestly, if Earthcraft gets unbanned, so be it. I think if you're playing a threat combo, it would have to be something completely crazy to play it over any of the other combo decks that are more definitive, less clunky, and also already are in the good colors, right? Because this is not a blue card, which,
Yep.
already hurts it quite a bit. There is one card that I would say conditionally. If they ban the ring, I could see Mana Drain coming back. Without the ring being banned, impossible, because then it's just way too much for the artifact decks to play.
Yeah, I could definitely see Mana Drain without the ring coming back, and that could be fun. I mean, Counterspell is already it sees very very little play. It's way too slow,
Hmm.
honestly. Even when it's
Yeah,
included, it probably shouldn't be. So having like a little bit stronger Counterspell could be nice to see and see what Control can do with it, or maybe even combo decks. But with the One Ring, definitely not time.
yeah.
But
All
yeah,
right.
I think
So
that's all
if you
from
have
us.
any comments or you have also thoughts about like, hey, I would do this or that, or your opinions are all wrong, here's what we have to do. Leave us a comment. We read all of them and we'll respond when we have time.
Thank you so much for watching the video. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you in our next video. Goodbye.
Bye.